The moment you realize you've been thinking about success all wrong. One day you realize something strange about success. You did everything right. The discipline, the habits, the goals, the sacrifices, the years of showing up when you didn't feel like it. And somehow it still doesn't feel right. Not failure, not burnout, just a quiet gap between what you built and what you thought it would feel like to build it. And that gap leads to a question most people spend their entire lives avoiding. What if the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall? In 1943, Abraham Maslow described the highest human drive as self-actualization. Becoming fully what you are capable of becoming. Not status, not wealth, not approval. Becoming. Most people never get there. Not because they aren't capable, but because somewhere along the way they replaced the question of who they were becoming with the question of how they were performing. Today, we need to talk about the moment that shift happens and what becomes possible when it reverses. The wall you never chose. From the time you were old enough to understand success, someone was already defining it for you. Grades, titles, salaries, follower counts, the car in the driveway, the job description on LinkedIn. None of these definitions were consciously chosen. They were absorbed. From parents, schools, media, and social circles. 1,000 quiet signals that told you what winning looked like before you were old enough to question whether the game itself was worth playing. And here is what makes this so difficult to see. The game produces real rewards. Play it well, and you get genuine things. Money, security, recognition, respect. These are not nothing. The problem isn't that the external game is worthless. The problem is that it was designed to produce compliant, productive participants, not fulfilled human beings. And those two outcomes are not the same thing. The most dangerous success is succeeding at a life you never chose. Most people sense this without being able to name it. They feel the gap but diagnose it as insufficient effort. So they climb harder, faster, with more discipline. And they arrive at a better position on a ladder that was never theirs to begin with. The effort trap. Here is something almost nobody says directly. Working harder inside the wrong framework doesn't produce fulfillment. It produces a more impressive version of the wrong life. Think about what that actually means. Imagine someone climbing a ladder with absolute discipline and perfect consistency. Every morning, every step, maximum effort across years, and then reaching the top only to realize the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. All that effort was real. All that discipline was genuine. But it produced a destination nobody actually chose. This is the effort trap, and it catches extraordinarily capable people precisely because their capability keeps them moving fast enough that they never stop to ask where they are going. On paper, both lives can look successful. One feels alive. The other feels managed. The difference isn't visible from the outside. It is only felt from the inside. And the moment you start feeling it is the moment the real question finally surfaces. Not how do I climb better, but which wall am I climbing? What you were actually measuring. Psychologists have a name for what happens when you finally reach the top. The arrival fallacy. The discovery, upon reaching a long-pursued goal, that the satisfaction you expected isn't there, or isn't enough, or disappears within days. Not because the goal wasn't worth pursuing, but because the goal was never really about the goal. It was about the feeling you believed the goal would produce. And that feeling of meaning, of mattering, of being fully present in your own life, cannot be delivered by an external outcome. Achievement is impressive, until you realize it answered the wrong question. Most people respond to the arrival fallacy by setting a bigger goal. If this achievement didn't satisfy, maybe the next one will. And so the cycle continues. More impressive rungs on the same ladder. More distance from the ground. More distance from the question that keeps quietly waiting. The moment you stop adding rungs and ask about the wall instead, that is when everything begins to shift. The reframe. So what does success look like when you strip away the borrowed definitions? It looks different for every person, which is exactly the point. But people who have made this shift tend to describe it in similar terms. Not a destination, a direction. Not an achievement, an alignment. Not a performance, a practice. The person who has made this shift isn't less ambitious. They are often more ambitious because their ambition is now connected to something they actually chose. Their energy stops leaking into maintaining appearances and chasing metrics that don't move them. It goes entirely toward the things that do. And effort aimed at something you actually chose compounds in ways the external game rarely delivers. A life that feels, from the inside, like yours. The moment itself, the moment this realization arrives, is rarely dramatic. It might come on a Tuesday morning when everything is going well on paper, and you notice, quietly, that you feel nothing. It might come after achieving something you worked years toward, and finding the satisfaction smaller than expected. It might come in a conversation with someone whose life looks nothing like yours on the outside and everything like what you want on the inside. However it arrives, it tends to feel less like inspiration and more like finally seeing something that was always there. What comes after is not easier. In some ways, it is harder. Because the external game at least comes with clear rules and measurable scores. Building your own game requires something more demanding. Knowing yourself well enough to choose the rules. But here is what people who have made this shift consistently report. The effort feels different. Not lighter necessarily, but directed, connected, alive in a way that optimized, externally validated effort rarely feels. Because for the first time, it belongs to you. The last thing. The strange thing about success is that most people spend years climbing before they realize they never chose the wall. The moment you notice that is disorienting at first. Not because it erases what you built, but because it changes what you decide to build next. Most people spend the first half of their lives chasing a definition of success they never consciously chose. The lucky ones, and luck here means being willing to ask uncomfortable questions, spend the rest building toward one they did. That shift doesn't require burning anything down. It doesn't require starting over or rejecting ambition. It just requires one honest moment. The moment you stop and ask, whose version of success have I been chasing? And then the harder question that follows. What would I build if the answer was allowed to be mine? Everything changes. Not because you stop climbing. Because for the first time, you choose the wall. If this landed somewhere real for you, tell me in the comments. I'm curious what part hit hardest. And if you found yourself somewhere in this video, somewhere between the ladder and the wall, that's worth sitting with. Subscribe if you want more thinking like this.